Welcome to Twistem TV, where reality bends, secrets surface, and nothing is what it seems. I'm your narrator, your guide through the quiet horrors we pretend not to see. Today, I bring you a story about family, but not the kind you find in postcards. This is the story of Cecilia, a girl raised on silence and lies, in a house where love was just another word for control. It all begins with a drawer that shouldn't have been opened, and letters that were never meant to be read. Cecilia had always known that her house was different, not because it was old or small, or filled with the smell of mothballs and eucalyptus oil, but because silence lived there. A silence that didn't just fill the gaps between words, it swallowed them. She was 14, and for as long as she could remember, she had lived with her grandmother, Dona Nair, in a crumbling house in a forgotten neighborhood on the outskirts of Rio de Janeiro. Her room was small, just large enough for a single bed, a desk, and a window that barely opened. The walls were thin, the ceilings cracked, and the floor creaked even under the lightest steps. Dona Nair was a woman of rituals. She woke at 5 a.m., prayed with the rosary pressed so tightly against her chest that the beads left marks. She cooked exactly enough food, never more, never less, and spoke only when necessary. Her words were dry, like crackers left out for too long. She had never once said, "I love you," to Cecilia. Not even on her birthdays. The only picture Cecilia had of her mother was torn, literally cut clean in half. Only a young woman's torso and arms remained in the frame. The face was gone, and when Cecilia once asked why, Nair responded flatly, "God has his reasons." School wasn't much better. She kept to herself, never invited anyone over. The other girls whispered things like, "She doesn't even know who her real parents are, and she lives with a witch." Cecilia didn't fight back. She couldn't. Every time she tried to defend herself, the lump in her throat betrayed her. Her only refuge was writing. In her worn-out notebook, she invented stories where girls like her became heroes. In one, she was a knight rescuing a lost queen. In another, she was a detective solving the case of a missing mother. One Thursday afternoon, during a rare cleaning fit, Cecilia opened a locked drawer in her grandmother's wardrobe. The key was taped under the kitchen sink, a detail Nair had probably forgotten in her old age. Inside, there were stacks of envelopes, yellowed by time, tied with a fraying blue ribbon. They were letters, addressed to Cecilia, all signed by Lorena Barbosa, her mother. With trembling hands, Cecilia read the first one. "You ruin everything you touch. I wish I had never brought you into this world." She blinked. "Read it again. You're a burden. I've tried to love you, but I just can't. I want to be free of you." There were at least 20 letters. None had stamps. None had ever been sent. The letters shattered her. Every word pierced like glass. She read them all that night, each one worse than the last. By morning, she felt like a shadow of herself, hollow, discarded. She didn't ask Nair about the letters. She knew better than to confront her grandmother directly. But something changed in her that day. She stopped writing stories. She stopped smiling. Her grades began to drop. And then something unexpected happened. In literature class, Professor Marcos handed back their essays. He paused at her desk. "You have something," he said softly. "The way you write. It's raw, honest. Do you keep a journal?" Cecilia nodded, unsure if he meant it as praise or pity. "Keep writing. Whatever you do, don't stop." That night, she opened her notebook for the first time in weeks. She didn't write fantasy. She wrote pain. She wrote the truth. And for the first time, her silence cracked. In the days that followed, Cecilia became two people. To her classmates, she was still the quiet girl in the back of the room, invisible, forgettable. But in her notebook, she was a storm. Words poured out of her like blood from an old wound. She wrote until her wrist hurt. Wrote about the hatred in the letters. Wrote about the mother who had written her off before she could even speak. She started avoiding home. After school, she'd sit in the public library until it closed, just to delay returning to that haunted house with its locked drawers and prayers that felt more like threats. Dona Nair didn't notice or didn't care. As long as Cecilia was home by 9 p.m., she said nothing. Sometimes Cecilia wondered if her grandmother even liked having her there, if she would notice if she never came back. One evening, while organizing the letters again in her room, Cecilia noticed something strange. She had never seen her mother's handwriting before, but there was something off about the way these letters were written. The curves of the L, the tightness of the R, the peculiar slant to the right. They looked eerily similar to someone else's. She pulled out an old birthday card from her grandmother, the only one she'd ever received. She placed it side by side with the first letter. The letters were a match. Her breath caught. A sharp chill ran down her spine. Her grandmother had written them. Her hands began to shake. She grabbed more samples, compared strokes, loops, spacing. It wasn't just a guess. It was undeniable. The truth hit her harder than the words in the letters ever had. Nair hadn't just let her believe her. Mother hated her. She had crafted that hatred, carefully, intentionally, over the years. Each word a weapon. Each letter a nail in the coffin of a relationship that might never have been broken in the first place. Why? Why would someone go so far? That night, she confronted Nair. The old woman sat at the kitchen table, shelling beans in silence, as always. Cecilia dropped the bundle of letters on the table. "You wrote this," she said, voice low but firm. Nair didn't even flinch. She glanced at the letters, then returned to the beans. "I protected you," she muttered. "Protected me?" Cecilia's voice cracked. "From what? From my own mother? From disappointment? From pain? From her?" Nair's tone turned sharper. "Lorena didn't want you. She was weak. Fracca. She would have ruined you. She tried to get me back, didn't she?" Cecilia asked, her voice trembling. "You stopped her." A pause. "Then, I saved you. That's all you need to know." Cecilia felt her knees weaken. Her vision blurred. It was all true. The abandonment, the silence, the years of growing up with questions that had answers, cruelly hidden from her. "I'm not your prisoner," she whispered. Donna Nair didn't respond. She didn't have to. The silence between Cecilia and her grandmother became thicker than ever. Not the silence of ignorance, but the silence of war. Each meal was cold, each prayer mechanical. The house felt smaller, like it was collapsing in on itself. Every corner filled with things unsaid and wounds still bleeding. But Cecilia had changed. Something inside her had snapped and awakened. She no longer walked with her head down. She no longer feared the stairs at school. She began researching legal terms at the library, reading about custody, guardianship, forged documents. She didn't know what she was looking for exactly, only that she wanted the truth. She started with the only thing she had, a name, Lorena Barbosa. At school, she timidly asked Professor Marcos if he knew anything about how to find someone legally. He looked at her carefully. "Is it your mother you're looking for?" She hesitated, then nodded. He didn't ask more. Instead, he returned the next day with a slip of paper. The name of a government-run service for tracing family members. It was something. A crack of light. Using her lunch money, Cecilia went to a public internet cafe. The computers were old and slow, but after hours of searching, she found something. A woman named Lorena Barbosa, working as a receptionist in a small medical clinic in Niterói. She printed the address. Her heart pounded. Could it really be her? The next Saturday, without telling Nair, she boarded the earliest bus. The trip was long and nauseating. She clutched the paper like it was sacred, running her fingers over the ink until it smudged. When she arrived at the clinic, her legs felt like water. She stood outside for a full hour, unable to move. And then, through the glass door, she saw her, a woman in her mid-30s. Long black hair tied neatly, tired eyes, delicate hands flipping through patient forms. The woman from the torn photograph. Cecilia stared, frozen. Could she go in? Could she say it? "I'm your daughter"? What if the woman denied it? What if she had another family, another life, one where Cecilia didn't exist? And then Lorena looked up, and their eyes met. Something flickered across her face, a shadow, a recognition. She stood, slowly approached the glass. For a moment, the world fell away.
"Cecilia?"
she whispered, her voice muffled by the door. Tears filled the girl's eyes. "You know me?" Lorena opened the door with trembling hands. "I've been looking for you for 10 years. Lorena trembled as she held Cecilia's hands, her fingers soft but unsure, like she didn't believe the girl standing in front of her was real. I didn't know if I'd ever see you again," she said, voice cracking. Cecilia stood still, her body stiff with confusion, anger, hope, mistrust. It was all too much. "Why did you leave me?" she asked, no softness in her tone. Lorena exhaled. She gestured to a bench near the clinic, and they sat, side by side but not touching. "I didn't leave you," she said slowly. "I lost you." And then the truth began to unfold. When Cecilia was born, Lorena was only 19, alone, scared and shamed by her family. Gustavo, Cecilia's father, refused to acknowledge her. Dona Nair, furious and unforgiving, declared that the child was a punishment from God. Lorena moved in with her mother after giving birth, but the pressure was unbearable. When I tried to move out with you, Lorena continued, Nair said I was unfit. She told people I was unstable, that I left you behind. She filed reports. False ones. Cecilia's stomach twisted. You tried to take me? Her voice was barely a whisper. More than once. I went to a judge, Cecilia, but Nair had papers, forged ones, and she had Gustavo's money behind her. I was a nobody. She paused, eyes brimming with unshed tears. She made me disappear from your life, piece by piece. The girl sat in stunned silence, the weight of years pressing on her chest. The letters, the lies, the cold distance. It hadn't been neglect. It had been theft. But the letters, Cecilia began. What letters? Cecilia pulled a folded sheet from her backpack. Lorena read it once, twice, her face twisting in horror. I never wrote this. I know, Cecilia murmured. It's your mother's handwriting. The two sat there, shattered pieces of a bond that had never been allowed to form. The wind blew gently. In that quiet, they shared something wordless, grief for what had been stolen, and a fragile thread of possibility for what could still be saved. I want to come live with you, Cecilia said suddenly. Lorena looked away. I wish it were that simple. Why not? Because legally Nair is still your guardian, and if we act rashly, she could accuse me of kidnapping. Again. The word again stung, but Lorena was already pulling out her phone. We'll go to a lawyer. I'll reopen the case. I'll show them everything. This time, we have your voice, your truth. Cecilia nodded slowly. For the first time in her life, someone was willing to fight for her. As they stood up, Lorena hesitated, then gently touched Cecilia's face. You look so much like me, she whispered, but stronger. Cecilia didn't cry. She didn't smile. But for the first time, she felt real. And that night, when she returned to the house of silence, she walked in with her head high. Dona Nair was waiting. She always was. The house was darker than usual when Cecilia got home. Not because of the setting sun, but because Nair had turned off every light in the hallway. A tactic, a message. You went to see her. It wasn't a question. It was a knife sharpened by certainty. Cecilia stood still, her backpack hanging off one shoulder. She didn't bother pretending anymore. Yes, she answered. She's not who you said she was. Nair stood from her chair like a statue coming to life, slow and full of menace. You think you know the truth just because of a few words? Her voice dripped venom. You don't know the weight of sacrifice. I know what manipulation looks like, Cecilia snapped. You forged letters. You destroyed her. And you tried to destroy me. For a moment, Nair said nothing. And then she slapped Cecilia. It wasn't the first time, but it would be the last. Without a word, Cecilia turned and walked away. Her cheek burned, her soul screamed. But she didn't cry. Not this time. She went straight to Professor Marcos's apartment. He had offered help if she ever needed it. And that night she did. By the next morning, Lorena had filed an emergency injunction. They presented the letters, the handwriting comparison, Cecilia's testimony, and even an old voice message Lorena had sent years ago, begging to see her daughter, ignored, and deleted by Dona Nair. The courtroom was a plain, bureaucratic space, a fluorescent cage where lives were dissected. But to Cecilia, it felt like the battlefield where her childhood might finally be acknowledged. Nair came in dressed in mourning black, as if she were the victim. She's been ungrateful, rebellious, distant, Nair told the judge. I gave up everything for her. I'm the only mother she's known. Lorena spoke after. Her voice trembled but held. I tried to fight the system. I had no power, no money. I begged to see her. I was told I was dangerous. Cecilia took the stand last. I've lived 13 years under a lie, she said. I was taught to hate someone I never even met. And when I found out the truth, I was hit. Silenced. I don't want revenge. I want to live. I want to write. I want a life that's mine. For once, her voice didn't shake. The judge didn't decide that day. But when they left the courthouse, Lorena held her daughter's hand, openly for the first time, and Cecilia led her. That night, back in Nair's house for what she knew would be the last time, Cecilia began to pack, quietly. Nair sat at the table, the same place she always had. But this time she didn't speak. Instead, she looked old, fragile, small. As Cecilia zipped her bag, she asked, not out of sympathy, but out of curiosity, "Why did you hate her so much?" Nair stared into her empty cup. "She took away my son. And then she brought you. A reminder of everything that went wrong." Cecilia nodded once. She understood now. Not forgave, but understood. And with that, she walked out. Weeks passed. The court ruling arrived on a Monday morning. A simple envelope stamped and official, but inside it carried the weight of a lifetime. The judge had ruled in Lorena's favor. Cecilia's guardianship was legally transferred. She was no longer under Nair's control. She was free. The move was quiet and bittersweet. Lorena's apartment was small, just a one-bedroom flat in a modest building in Niterói, but to Cecilia, it was the beginning of everything. They shared the space awkwardly at first, strangers with blood ties. The silence between them was different from the silence of Nair's house. Not heavy with fear, but cautious with hope. Lorena gave her the bed, slept on the couch. They cooked dinner together clumsily. Cecilia made rice too soft. Lorena burnt the beans. They laughed once, then again. And one night, Cecilia found a photo album in a box at the bottom of a drawer. Real photos of her, a baby on Lorena's lap, a toddler in a plastic pool, a child blowing candles. Proof that there was a time when she had been loved, cherished. "I kept everything," Lorena said softly from the doorway, "even when they said I should forget." Cecilia's chest ached, and slowly she started writing again. Not fantasy this time, but memoir, painful, raw, unfiltered. She wrote about the silence, the letters, the betrayal, the courtroom, the way people twist love into control, and how words, hers, had brought the truth to light. With Professor Marcos's encouragement, she submitted her writing to a national teen literary contest. Weeks later, an email arrived. She had won. The prize was small, a laptop, a certificate, and a spot in a young writer's workshop in São Paulo. But to Cecilia, it felt like being heard for the first time. At the closing event of the workshop, she stood in front of a room of strangers and read an excerpt from her piece. "They told me my mother didn't love me, that I was unwanted, but they were wrong. I wasn't unloved, I was hidden, forgotten by those who were supposed to protect me, and remembered only by the one who never stopped searching." When she finished, there was silence, then applause. Not the kind that fills stadiums, but the kind that reaches the bones. Afterward, one of the judges and a published author son approached her. "Have you ever thought of turning your story into a book?" Cecilia smiled for the first time in a long time. "I already did," she said. "In my head, for years." She went home, opened a new notebook, crisp, clean, untouched, and wrote the title on the first page. The Notebook of Cecilia. Not the one filled with lies, but the one filled with truth. The one she would write, word by word, as her own. Cecilia's story isn't just about betrayal, it's about survival. And in a world full of twisted truths, she found her voice where no one expected, on the page. If stories like this keep you up at night, you're in the right place. Subscribe to Twistem TV, ring the bell, and join me for the next descent into the hidden, the painful, and the real. Until then, remember, not every monster hides under the bed. Some wear rosaries and call it love.